Okay, thanks very much. And I hope people got a chance to have a look at the four demos. It's great to see the engagement, and there's some really great technology down there. So again, we're going to run those demos later on in the day, so please attend. So I'm delighted here to be joined by some of Integrity 360 people, some of our key technology partners, end users who are specialists in cloud security. Just to get us going, I guess we're all aware of cloud. Pretty much the debate has gone now in terms of the world is moving to cloud. You cannot not move to cloud. The efficiencies, the speed, the agility, etc. You can't and not do it. But we all know if we're in this game that there are real security challenges that go with that, and that's what we're going to delve into over the next 30 minutes or so. So just to get us going, I might just go around the table here and ask everyone to introduce themselves. A really quick introduction, name, company you're from, and maybe just something on your cloud background, and then we'll get into some questions. So I'll start maybe with Amit, please.
Okay. So my name is Ahmed. I'm delighted to be here. I'm a technical product manager for Integrity 360 and cloud security, along with data and identity security, are my key specialty areas.
Thanks, Amit.
David Cahill, I'm Enterprise Security Architecture Manager in Post, and my area of focus within cloud would be in integration, both with our existing and emerging technology stack, and integration across the business.
Thanks, Dave.
Nachiket Joshi. I'm Cloud Sales Engineering Manager with CrowdStrike. I have spent about 5 years in cloud security and about 20 years in information security space.
Perfect. Yeah, my name is Pritesh Mistry. I'm one of the pre-sales engineers at Trellix, focusing on the cloud platform of bringing multi-cloud environments and protecting those environments.
Thanks, Tesh.
And finally, I'm Scott Walker. I'm responsible for the Orca business across EMEA. I've worked in the more traditional security for the past 15 years and held various technical roles around enterprise architecture and systems engineering within cloud and traditional data center as well.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Okay, just to get us going sort of at a high level, just talk about security, cloud versus all traditional on-prem, hybrid, etc. In the old world, you own the infrastructure, you could control it, you could secure it, etc. In the new world now, you don't own the infrastructure, it's always changing, it's dynamic. Just in that sort of context, be interested to know your views on what are the main differences and challenges between old world and new world. And again, just to get us going, I've heard different people say, well, actually, as far as cloud security goes, it's a totally different game than the on-prem traditional. Or I've heard other people say, well, actually, from a security point of view, it's the basic same principles, you just apply them to the cloud. So maybe we'll just go around the table and get some views on that. If I start with yourself, Scott, please.
Yeah, for sure. I think from my perspective, we come with a ton of experience of how to secure, your more traditional data center. We have a ton of information around how we can, build a bigger moat, how we protect identities, all of the more traditional risk. With cloud security, there's complexities in the sense of, it's more agile, it's fast, it's ever-changing. Things tend to be quite ephemeral. They can be there 1 minute, gone the next. The applications and the data that we're pushing out to the cloud, it can be changed from minute to minute. So that presents its own risks. That being said, I maybe have quite a controversial view in the sense of, a workload that exists in the cloud or an operating system that exists in the cloud is the same as it was within a private data center or in a traditional private cloud. It's just someone else owns that, right? So a lot of the ways in which we need to think about security, the ways in which we need to think about securing our data and applications still very much remain the same. Many of the customers that we work with on a day-to-day, they're still struggling with just being able to keep up with the inventory that they have within the public cloud. What do we have? And it's very difficult to secure what you can't see. The second is around the visibility. As part of the inventory, we need to see, what applications we have in the cloud. We need to think about the data that resists within the cloud, who has access to it. So that level of visibility is important. And then around traditional things like vulnerability management, the risk exposure, how is an application compromisable across different assets within the cloud as well. So we start to see some of the themes that are exactly the same as what we've been working on for the past 2 decades in securing information systems on-prem. I think the slight difference with cloud is engineering teams, operations for particularly within tech companies and things like that, it's all around speed, it's all around efficiency, it's all around releasing code as quickly as possible. And that presents a challenge for security. So often we need to think about how we, maybe fix our vulnerabilities, fix risk earlier on in the development of applications, how we work cross-functional amongst teams. And I think the biggest piece of advice or the thing that I've learned is, the more buy-in you can get from ops teams, from developers, from your operations, the earlier you can end up fixing your risk within cloud.
Okay, super, Scott. So I guess you're saying traditional, but then there are differences in terms of speed and developing apps and thinking of security earlier on in the development lifecycle, etc.
I think a lot of the basic principles remain the same, right? You want to be able to build a list of the things you have. You want to see what things are doing, and then you want to put controls in place to be able to mitigate as much of that risk as you possibly can. The challenges and where different technologies can help is around how you operationalize things within the cloud, how you can have security be absolutely complementary to the goals of DevOps and releasing applications and code quickly.
Okay, great. Anybody like to add to that, or anybody have a dissenting view in terms of material differences between securing cloud versus securing on-prem?
No, I would absolutely agree with with Scott on this one. But just to add to this one, so when it comes to cloud, it's more about understanding the responsibility of the CSPs and the organizations themselves, right? So there is at times some blur when I talk to like lots of organizations. They tend to assume that CSP will give them enough security for their applications, for the data, for their operating systems and different workloads, right? So if there is a good understanding, I think it gets easier to understand like what falls in your bucket as an organization to secure and what is covered by CSP basically, right? So that's where if that blur is understood well, that boundary is understood well, it gets easier to start protecting the applications and data in cloud.
Well, actually, that probably leads us on to another hot topic, which you brought us nicely onto. So the shared responsibility model. I guess that's what we're getting into there, right? So maybe just talk around the shared responsibility model. I guess in the early days of migration to the cloud, there was probably a view that you might have had a complex infrastructure in place to take care of security on-prem or hybrid, but when you went to the cloud, the assumption, clearly wrong once people understood it, was once it gets to the cloud, security is sorted because these big hyperscalers will sort it, etc. Right? And then I think over time people started to understand the shared responsibility model, and it wasn't quite that clear. So maybe just talk about the shared responsibility model. Maybe just put it out there. Who's a good person to pick that up? Maybe Tesh, just in terms of the shared responsibility model, do we think the market understands it? What do you think are the complexities that go with the shared responsibility model? Maybe just give us your views on that, Tesh, please.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is some confusion out there for sure. When you think of some of these cloud providers as such, there's a lot of security features that are built out of the box, which protect their environment, maintain the uptime of these environments. But I think the confusion is obviously what you put inside of those containers and what you're doing to protect that environment, whether that's network security, which you still need to have, data that sits within there, obviously endpoint agents, etc., on your servers, etc., that are going to be running in those cloud environments. So that is obviously the responsibility of the customer or of the organization to maintain that. And obviously that's where that falls into. So for example, Trellix with AWS and a couple of the other platforms that we partner with, we are on the marketplace, and likewise, I'm pretty sure CrowdStrike will be again another vendor that's as part of that. So the difference is obviously these cloud platform providers will give you some form of security features, but where the likes of other vendors like Trellix will come into play will be to enhance those security features.
And just to build on that, in terms of like what we're seeing now, I know I keep saying moving to the cloud, but what we are seeing is actually people aren't moving to the cloud; they're moving to multi-cloud. So does anybody want to just pick up sort of the additional complexity of that shared model when you're in multi-cloud land?
It's more about like try and understand your service level agreement well, right? So what is it that you're consuming from this cloud? Are you just looking for the IaaS service, PaaS service, SaaS service, right? So once you understand the service model well, you will understand that in this service model, I have to cover the application layer myself, or the data layer myself, or the configuration layer myself, right? So basically, absolutely agree with Pritesh. So once you understand the service model well, define the boundaries, and that will then help you lead into like security conversations with the likes of like security vendors in the market, right? So once this definition is done, you can have a roadmap to build your security architectures. Could be a public cloud, could be a private cloud, doesn't matter. I mean, I've seen like some customers going for somebody else's private cloud environments, like service providers, for example. And again, there is a boundary, right? There is your application, there is your data. Who's going to look after these data and applications, right? So with the definition of the boundary and right level of SLAs, basically it becomes clear what falls in your bucket to secure.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Nachi. Anybody want to add to that? I've got a sort of follow-on question that's sort of connected to that. I might point to that maybe Am at the start. So Am, just in terms of, so we're talking about clouds, maybe multi-clouds. There's definitely if you're at a board level discussion and if you're talking to a CFO or a CEO, what we hear is, well, listen, I've made a big investment in one of the hyperscalers, made a big investment in AWS, Azure, or whatever. What they want to do is that they want to leverage that investment to take care of security. And they're assuming that these guys have security covered. So I'd be just interested in your view in terms of native tools in those platforms versus specific security tools. Just your view in terms of, should companies be saying, well, I can use the native tools on the platform, security is taken care of, or I need to do something else above and beyond that? I'll just start maybe with yourself, Ahmed, but I'll go around the table.
Yeah, definitely. So I would say that there is of course, it depends on the requirements and on the organization business usage of these clouds. That's an important aspect of it. The second point would be understanding what the native CSP security, I would say, solutions or the security aspect of their products would actually offer. So there's always limitations and capabilities, etc. So usually you will start by enabling the native security features. So if we take one example, something around, let's say, a CSPM element, the Cloud Security Posture Management, for example, or CNAP. So there is, the first aspect is how can I use or utilize the native toolings, to get quickly to some value. Maybe it will actually fulfill 90% of my security requirements. And then when I start maturing my security controls and maturing my procedure and the business usage in clouds and development, for example, etc., then maybe there is a better solution that's more fit to purpose. And then I can expand to different controls, I would say, to cover these use cases. On the other side, if you're using, like AWS and Azure and GCP, for example, it's very common, I would say, that there is a need to have a more bird's eye or holistic view of what's happening on the different cloud environments. And usually, we will tend to go towards a security vendor-specific security solution, CNAP, most probably, to cover that or to provide this holistic view, of everything that happens across these multi accounts and different cloud security providers, I would say.
Okay, thanks, Ahmed. And I actually might come back to CNAP in a second, but I might just stick with this question for a second. Tesh, yourself, any view again,
Yeah.
native tools versus bespoke, etc.?
I think so. I think we've all touched on it a little bit today, but in terms of obviously with each cloud platform that you're using, right, the complexity becomes on that multi-cloud that you said, right? Because one cloud isn't going to play nicely with the other cloud, right? So all of a sudden you're going to have that challenge of having multiple cloud platforms with rules, policies that you're going to implement. And in an ideal world, we'd want to have that one rule or one policy across multiple cloud platforms. And that's the challenge, right? And obviously, For example, Trellex, we simplify things because what we're doing here is we're feeding all the logs from these cloud platforms, so we can see that from an XDR standpoint, and we apply that threat intelligence and the AI piece of it, which I know we're going to cover off later on. But we allow that to be then seen from that holistic level, as Ahmed was saying, as such. So that's where I think the challenge for a lot of organizations is that multi-cloud, multi-tenant. How do they maintain the policies, the rules?
Okay, great. And actually, just you mentioned large organizations. I'd be interested in Dave's point of view here because he's from a large organization. He's probably in this scenario real world. So Dave, would be interested in your view on that?
Yeah, so coming back to a point that was made earlier on, like it's really about understanding your environment. So at a holistic level, what does your environment look like? What does on-prem look like? What does cloud look like? What are your assets? What are you trying to protect? And like Ron, you hit on a key point there around like, yes, organizations are making significant investments with these large cloud providers, and there is a focus, obviously, cost efficiencies and all that as to how we leverage those investments. But when you look at your environment holistically, 9 times out of 10, unless you're operating a greenfield site, those controls that are in cloud are not necessarily going to be 100% like for on-prem. So I think that's a good instance whereby you can go, right, yes, the native tooling is going to cover me 100% here for my cloud footprint. However, does that same capability reflect back to on-prem? And not only does it reflect to on-prem, but do I have the same centralized visibility? Do I have the same management console that's going to give me that consistent view of my cloud configuration and on-prem? And I think that's an instance whereby you can make a clear, business case to say, right, okay, yes, we can leverage our investment here. However, if we want to have that equal bar, that set of security capabilities, we're actually going to have to invest and augment with third-party tooling that's going to help us out to cover our entire environment.
Okay, so I think we're sort of getting, and Ahmed mentioned CNAP there earlier on, and probably a few answers have touched around that. Just without getting into huge detail on CNAP, do we think now is the right time? It's a relatively new concept, just in terms of the Gartner hype cycle, etc. Do you think the market now is the time for CNAP, or is it early? Is the adoption time here now? Any views on that? I'll maybe throw that over to Nachi, yourself. That?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, CNAP, a big conversation to have. I think we can spend a few hours on the CNAP alone here, right? But if we classify CNAP into like CSPM, CWP, DSPM, ASPM, KSPM, I'm going to stop here now, otherwise I'll just continue on that one. So there are a variety of different conversations to have. And we can also look at this from a technical perspective and say like CSPM being agentless, right? CWP in some cases being agentless or with agent. ASPM is coming up semi-agentless, I would say, going forward. DSPM again, like agentless basically, right? So there are like different situations here, and I always get these questions, and we were discussing this as well, like before this conversation started, like what about agentless, agent, and CNAP? Like how do we play in this area? And unfortunately, there is no single answer here. It depends on the situations, right? So if you have like a cloud environment where you are consuming lots of CSP services like RDS services, IAM roles, like managed buckets from these guys, makes sense. Just go agentless, I would say, right? So just make the API connections, look for the misconfigurations in the cloud. Why not? Look for like overly permissive access given to the roles. Why not? It's just pretty much agentless approach. But when you look at some of the situations where you may have applications like public-facing web applications, for example, on a container or a virtual machine, which may have a threat against zero-day attacks, right? So when you go agentless, you can scan for the knowns. As I always say, like to my customers and organizations I speak to, with the agentless approach, you can scan for knowns, your known misconfigurations, like known malicious samples. Anything known can be scanned easily. We all know that. But when it comes to attack against the applications, the zero-day attacks especially, the unknown malicious samples, so like unknown misconfigurations, it is always helpful to complement your security architecture with agent-based approach. And that's where, again, the CWP comes in, right? The cloud workload protection, basically. So CSPM, completely agentless, very popular in the market. A CWP with the agent complements your agentless approaches, basically. And again, ASPM, as I said, like if you look at the application security posture management, that's becoming sort of like agentless as well. It started with agent, but that's going agentless to understand like now how is your applications communicating, what sort of dependencies you have within the applications layer, what sort of exposure you have at the applications layer, right? So that's becoming a good conversation as well. And DSPM, like understanding your data, like where your data sits, what sort of data classifications you have, like what sort of data exposure you have, and data movements is becoming a different topic these days, right? Where is my data moving from here to that, like to S3 bucket, to a virtual machine, to somebody's like, inbox, somebody's application. So DSPM plus data movements within CNAP becoming a huge topic, I would say, these days from the cloud perspective. So I would stop here because, as I said, otherwise I would just keep
Not okay. Very, very good. Thanks, Nachi. I know that could go on for another hour, so we'll stop it there, right? Slightly changed topic. So, cloud misconfigurations. Gartner have a stat out there that something like 99% of cloud breaches are down to human error and misconfigurations. View in terms of what organizations can do to protect against that human element and those misconfigurations. Start with yourself, Ahmed, please.
Definitely. So I would say that misconfigurations it can be perceived as a vulnerability, but without a CVE, really. So it's one of the most critical vulnerabilities in any system, in any organization, is the misconfiguration. The real challenge here is you cannot, unlike a traditional vulnerability, I would say, you do not have the CVE and a description, etc. So when we think about misconfiguration, like I like to imagine a square. The first corner here is how actually to define if this configuration in front of me is misconfiguration or not. So how to define it. If I know what misconfiguration is, then how to spot it in terms of process and technology, like tooling, how to spot it. And the third corner will be how to remediate, how to fix this misconfiguration in a practical way, not for example, manually, or so it has to be in a practical way. And the fourth corner, which I would say is, when we're growing in the maturity of this process, would be how to prevent it from happening. So enforcing basically the best practice or policies, or enforcing, hygiene and guide rails, how to enforce it so that we can avoid misconfigurations.
And that enforcement, are you talking about technology to enforce it, or people and processes? What are you?
I would say I'm always biased towards technology and tooling. So once I have we have the, let's just say, agreed process or workflow, then I want to enforce that with technology, with tools.
Okay.
So yes, when we talk about the four corners really of that square, I'm always trying to how to operationalize it, like how to turn that abstraction into an actual control using an actual tool, like again, CNAP, for example, the consolidation.
CNAP again, okay.
Exactly.
Any more from the panel, just in terms of misconfigurations, controls, guide rails, what we can put in place to protect against it? Anybody else want to add to that, what Ahmed said?
When it comes to misconfigurations, I think pretty much all the organizations understand this already. But if you didn't, I think there is a way to handle these misconfigurations in a much better way, which like if you use Terraform sort of templates to go and deploy this infrastructure in your cloud, what I've seen is pretty much all the organizations have started scanning these templates in the pipelines that they use to go and deploy these templates. So like shift left, right? Scan your templates, make sure like there are no misconfigurations to begin with. And once you have cleared the template from any sort of like security gaps and misconfigurations, then if you go and deploy after that, you will have much less noise to deal with from the dashboards perspective and operations perspective as well. And you will have much clean and much higher security effectiveness within your production environment.
I think that's really key. The idea of, you speak to any developer, their code is the best thing since sliced bread. Right, let's be really clear. And no one by design wants their code to have vulnerabilities or misconfigurations within it, but we're human by nature, right? We are going to make mistakes by design. And when you think about the goal of a developer releasing products and services to create competition against their, win market share, they're going as fast as they possibly can. And often, you go to an engineer and say there's a vulnerability within your code and we need to break fix that, they tend to be not happy. But if you do follow this kind of shift left principle of trying to identify your risk as early on as possible within the development lifecycle, not only does it become far easier to resolve, you create the kind of internal politic challenges around working with security and development in tandem, and they're able to be able to fix those things far earlier. And the outcome then is that when you're in production and you are scanning for vulnerabilities and risk and exposure and how that's exploitable, you significantly reduce your attack surface, by design, by shifting left. And we see a lot of customers who are really adopting the principles of not breaking something after it's happened, but really starting to focus on how they can get ahead of fixing vulnerabilities and risk earlier on in the development life cycle. I think that's key.
And just to add to this one, there are a lot of ways to automate whatever Scott said, right? It doesn't have to be manual, is my point, right? You can have auto identification, you can have auto remediation, you can have like auto fixing exercises deployed within your pipeline, right? So you can pretty much automate everything basically here within these like shift left approaches.
Okay. So maybe let's not stick with, but if we're saying, and I think everyone around the table said misconfigurations, the human factor, probably Gartner say it, so it must be right. Everyone is saying the misconfigurations is the biggest risk. I might go around the table on this one. I might start yourself, Scott. That's okay. So if we say the number one risk is misconfigurations, right? And I'd be interested in everyone's view on this. What's the number 2, 3, 4 risk that goes with cloud security? And I probably don't expect everybody to agree on this, but it'd be great to hear what the panel think. So I'll start with you, Scott, if that's okay.
I'm not going to give you my answer. I'm going to give you every customer I speak to's answer is just inventory. And I know that might sound relatively boring, but it's just having a clear picture within the public cloud of the different types of workloads that you have. Your virtual machines, your buckets, your Kubernetes clusters, all of those different environments, just having that one consolidated view of assets and workloads that you have across multi-cloud is the number one risk that all CISOs talk to me about every single day. So I'd say inventory.
The theme almost of our last conference, visibility we were talking about, visibility of
Same
inventory.
thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
You've cut it down. I asked for 3, but I'll stick with 1 because you're right.
Sorry,
Time is
one.
going to be a problem.
Yeah.
I go around the table. Test yourself.
Yeah.
After misconfiguration, then the biggest risk.
I guess it's the level of access within the environment, right? Because what level of access people have with configurations, or whether it's data access, that becomes a big challenge, and I hear that quite a lot. So shadow IT can solve for those types of things, understanding the level of risk with an application or how an application is being set up, and then obviously in terms of then access, what are users doing within the environment, what data they have access to, how much data they're downloading, and then based on that you've got the ability to then set up policies that cater to the business rather than just open up a box and going with the standard like metrics that are out of there.
Okay, great, thank you.
The next one from my side should be APIs, because of the dynamic nature of the cloud, dynamic nature of the applications, containers, virtual machines, everything. I think people have opened up lots of APIs. Let's agree on that, right? So if you're not trying to secure or look after your APIs, what's going to happen is somebody's going to start spinning up like hundreds of virtual machines when you're like having holidays or sleeping, and they will do crypto mining. Believe me, I've seen that happening. Right, so look after the APIs. I would say find the API usage to begin with. Going back to Scott, like visibility of the not only assets but APIs as well, and protect the APIs, please.
Okay, great point. Yeah, Dave.
Outside of what's already been discussed,
Well, you feel free to agree, but
I'd
or something new actually, something new, right?
I'd suggest understanding what your posture is vis-a-vis DDoS, so a distributed denial of service. Yeah. So, what does your application estate look like? What are your web-facing services? What do you have, again, if you're leveraging, native tooling within a cloud environment, what layer of DDoS protection is there? What's your tolerance? So, like, do you have layer 3 protection? Do you have layer 7 protection? If there's an application-specific attack that comes in, what does that protection look like? How is it invoked? Again, what are the thresholds? How do you ensure provision of those key services for your customers?
And just on the DDoS one, I was trying to keep do you see that as a specific risk? If I asked the question generally on security, I would get DDoS, right? On cloud, do you see that? Do you see a bigger risk of the DDoS risk?
I see it as a big risk for cloud because people just assume, like, there's a lot of misconceptions out there about what cloud does, do, and doesn't. But like it, people assume that you get this DDoS protection there, and yes, there will be a level of DDoS protection there. But what does the footprint of your services look like? What are your web services? How many customers are connected, and what does an average day look like? What's your tolerance for a layer 7 attack that comes in, and you've 10 times the amount of traffic? Does your native tooling cover for that?
Yeah, and I guess what you're saying is in the on-prem world, you probably would have built a DDoS solution, and you're assuming that's in the cloud. But again, that's a false assumption. I got you. Okay, thanks. Ahmed, yourself?
Yeah, I'll just add data. So building on what Scott said, when it visibility, yeah, that's brilliant. So all the assets, etc., but also the visibility into the data types and the sensitivity of data and data classification, etc. So back to Brian's, I would say, presentation in the morning when he was saying that 90% of data is unstructured, for example. So just an example would be the likes of SharePoint Online, etc. So there is the sensitivity of data in cloud, how easy it can get leaked or it can fall in the wrong hands, etc. I would say that data security in cloud is one of the top threats, of course.
Okay, great. I'm just getting the time there. I think 5 minutes. Okay, so I might just ask one question, guys. I'll throw it open to the room in a sec. Any questions you have? But last one, and maybe I probably don't have time to go around the table. Tesh, maybe yourself, just in terms of AI. I guess one of the themes of the event. Quick view in terms of AI from a security point of view. Is it friend or foe? Is the defenders or the attackers getting most of it? I know it's an impossible question to answer quickly, but really quick view, and then I'll throw it open to the room.
Yeah, I think it's still fairly new, right? So we're seeing AI being used in different ways. Obviously, you've got the dark web, which have got Worm GPT, for example, people creating source code on there or targeting, vendors. We're all in that same boat where we're going to be targeted. Vendors are going to be targeted. Phishing campaigns. We're seeing professional emails now written, so it's more easy for employees to fall for these and fall victim to them. In terms of obviously for AI, something at Trellix that we're doing, and it's very successful within our customer base, is obviously from an XDR standpoint. Think about the burden with like SecOps teams, millions of tickets coming through, alerts coming through. They don't have time to kind of analyze all those tickets, right? So adding that threat intelligence, the analytics, the AI to it, which is now treating every ticket as a P1, should I say, right? Going through and checking everything, giving you the next steps and remediation steps. That's something that I think the SecOps teams are going to be wanting.
Okay, absolutely. And listen, I know everybody's would have a view on that, but I'm just going to time out. Guys, I'm just going to open it up to the floor. I think we've got a couple of microphones going around the room. So we've got a few minutes. Any questions on all things cloud security? Questions, views, comments? Anybody got anything that they want to contribute? Some brave person, first question. No? No? I've been saved. Thank you. Sorry, we got a microphone here. Melissa, just here. Could you just say your name and what company you're from as well, please?
Morning, Neil White from Designer Group. Just curious what the guys think with all these multiple cloud environments and all these various systems. What's their thought on the various identities and the identity management around that, particularly with shadow IT and lots of these SaaS systems being added in? What's a good approach, or what the guys think a good approach to that would be?
Identity management on multi-clouds and SaaS. Okay, great question. Anybody want to, Scott? You look like you want to answer that? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think it kind of comes back to the key principle of the visibility. So, being able to have an inventory of all of the assets and where those identities exist, being able to see who takes ownership of those identities as well, because they're not always a human. They can be assets, they can be part of environments. So understanding who's got the responsibility and ownership of those things. And then I think the one that's often overlooked is like, what's the exposure of that identity across multiple systems? For example, you can have an asset with an identity that can be used for lateral movement risk, and actually that has, ramifications across lots of different systems. So I think there are tools and technologies out there that will give you that agnostic view of identities, both machine identities and human identities across your environments completely holistically, and then give you lots of context and insight into the risk and the exposure and things like that. There's lots of help and advice that we can share on that.
I think as well, having an authoritative source of truth, just to expand on that in terms of user identity. So then, regardless of which environment or which cloud platform it resides in, that you understand the user, what access they have, and it should be regardless of what the user type is. So whether they're a permanent staff member, whether they're a contractor, whatever the case may be. But having that authoritative source of truth, as you said, it ties in with the visibility piece again.
Great, thanks very much. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the question. One more question, maybe, and I think we're probably done. One more question from the room. No? Last chance. Oh, here, one question in the front here. Melissa, just in the front.
Darren Russell from the ESB. Just a quick question there. There was a lot of talk about multi-cloud, and but for organisations that aren't multi-cloud and are sticking with one cloud service platform, just be interested just in the native tooling. Like, is that sufficient? I got a sense there when you had multi-cloud, there's a need for that overarching type of governance and oversight. But just your own experience with GCP or with Azure, like, how do you think the native tooling stacks up?
So I would, and this always comes up. So thanks for the question, actually. Very good question. I would always look for somebody's security effectiveness, right? And there are reports available in the market. I mean, you can look at like MITRE tech report, and we used to have these NSS reports in the past, right? So you want to protect your applications, right? From the runtime perspective, from the managed services perspective, your data protection. So I always say, like, when you talk to a CSP or a security vendor, look at everything from threat intelligence and security effectiveness perspective, basically, because let's say, hypothetically speaking, and I would try this myself, using ChatGPT, I could build a sort of like sensor, compete with CrowdStrike myself, basically, and see, like, now I've got something which can scan for like number of samples and number of malicious events in the market. But would you buy from me? Maybe not, right? Definitely not. So the point is, like, once you understand, like, a security vendor can do this sort of security effectiveness, let's say 99 or 99.99 or something like that, then you get to understand and compare with your CSP's native tooling, like, what sort of security effectiveness comes from native tooling. And then you will have your answer, basically.
I'll probably add to that as well. Like, so I think what Nuchkeet said, yes, you want to look at this, what the CSP is providing versus what you can do to additionally protect your environment. But I think maybe one of the other challenges that I see a lot from people is that, for example, AWS, they have so many services and features, but each feature requires you to log into a separate application or separate portal, and that becomes challenging because you got to remember passwords. You got to then you don't have logs. You're feeding logs into a SIEM. It could get lost. You don't have that single dashboard. So really, I guess from my perspective, I would say like that higher level, that XDR platform ties all of that together. So you're saving your staff that burden, that time. You're spotting like more risk, or you'll spot more threats in the organization or more misconfigurations. You'll be able to easily see that from a higher view. And I think that's the piece that you need to kind of, whether you're multi-cloud or single cloud, the challenge is still the same. You're still getting multiple alerts and multiple like applications, and that's what you're trying to solve.
Okay, thanks for the question. Listen, we've got to call it there. I'm getting the evil eye from Anya there. I think we're at time. So listen, just to wrap up, thanks Ahmed, thanks Dave, thanks Tesh, thanks Scott. I really appreciate that. Great conversation, and we'll hand it back to Anya. Thank you.